Living together has become an insurmountable challenge. How have I made it clear that I've reached my limit? I plead desperately with my wife, Mary, but she merely gazes at me coldly and retorts, "If you have a problem, why don't you leave?" "Fine, I'll leave this house." As I exit, divorce papers firmly in hand, I contemplate the fate awaiting Mary and her mother. My name is John White, and I'm turning 41 this year. Mary and I have been married for 7 years, both of us engrossed in different professions. My upbringing was shaped by my maternal grandparents after my parents perished in a car accident during my childhood. My grandfather's love for travel became my solace, taking me to diverse places. Influenced by his wanderlust, I turned my solo travels into a source of income, working as a freelancer and blogging about my adventures. It was during one of these trips that I crossed paths with Mary. Our encounter took place in a bustling bar where she commanded attention among a group of people. Drawn to her charisma, I found myself unintentionally following her with my eyes. Mary, a hardworking salesperson at a brokerage firm, appeared radiant. After exchanging contact information and a persistent pursuit, we began dating, eventually leading to marriage. Even after tying the knot, I continued my blogging endeavors while Mary pursued a career as a company employee. However, the strains in our relationship surfaced when Mary casually assigned me household chores one day, despite my ongoing workload. This situation worsened when Mary's mother, Susan, entered the scene unexpectedly, armed with a key to our home. Caught off guard, I questioned Mary about this intrusion, only to face Susan's disapproving glare. Mary, rather than defending our partnership, sided with her mother, condemning my contributions to the household. As the criticisms piled up, all I could do was retreat to the silence of my room, my main concern being Susan's influence, as she continued to play a significant role in our lives since the beginning of our marriage. My work-from-home lifestyle has never gained favor in her eyes. Susan consistently makes snide remarks, and Mary, regrettably, has never stood up for me during these verbal assaults. Post-marriage, I discovered that Mary, raised with constant praise by her mother, was imbued with pride and vanity. Their dependency on each other became glaringly evident, and any complaint I aired about Susan would immediately upset Mary. The prospect of Susan's frequent visits became a source of dread, just the thought of it inducing a sense of depression. Predictably, she started dropping by regularly, scrutinizing every household chore and spending entire days at our home, engrossed in conversations with Mary on her days off. This relentless intrusion left me emotionally drained. On Susan's birthday, I reluctantly made my way to her house, considering it a duty I had to fulfill. Mary, preoccupied with work, had already left, and we planned to meet at Susan's. As I arrived alone, I presented Susan with a beautifully wrapped handmade bag, purchased during a shop visit for an interview. Before I could explain, she dismissed it with disdain, insinuating it was a cheap freebie. "No, that's not it," I hurriedly denied, but she paid no heed. Her disdain continued, criticizing my choice and deeming it thoughtless. Despite my attempt to defend the thoughtful gesture, she berated me with a sharp look, expressing her dissatisfaction. "Enough already. I don't appreciate how you use your job as an excuse to travel and inconvenience Mary. It's not fair," I retorted, defending my pride in my work. But she continued to look down on me. "Pride in your little side hustle? That's laughable. You're living off Mary. Return this useless thing and bring me gift cards instead." Frustrated, I put the present back in the bag and headed to the department store. "I'd like $200 in gift cards, please." After purchasing and wrapping the gift cards, I returned to my in-laws' house, feeling a heaviness. "I'm back, Susan," I announced. Mary, who had arrived in the meantime, chimed in, "John, it's Mom's celebration today. I ordered some fancy takeout." The dining table was filled with dishes from a famous restaurant, but I was told to cook, so I bought ingredients. Susan interrupted. "What are you talking about? This is obviously better than your cooking. Thanks for this, Mary." I could only watch with a dissatisfied look. Reluctantly, I sat down and we started eating. Mary and Susan were chatting happily, but I felt left out. Near the end of the meal, Mary suddenly suggested, "Hey, John, shouldn't we consider moving? There's a new high-rise nearby. Living somewhere with a great view and atmosphere would really motivate me at work." Susan was obviously thrilled, and I quickly interjected, "Isn't our current house good enough?" Mary looked visibly annoyed, and Susan glared at me, pressuring me to agree. Feeling small, I conceded, "Okay, indeed, it's not a bad idea." While proceeding with the arrangements, I firmly told Mary, "I need you to promise me something. Once we move, don't give the key to Susan. I've reached my limit with her meddling. If you can't promise that, we can't move." Mary seemed thoughtful, then put her hand on my shoulder, saying, "Okay, if you say so. I can't help it. I won't give her the key." With her promise not to give Susan a key, I felt relieved and continued with the moving preparations. Months later, we moved into the high-rise. The location was fantastic, with a great view and a luxurious interior. Living there with Mary, I was finally enjoying a fulfilling life. However, the issue with Susan still loomed. "Hey, can I invite my mom over today?" Mary asked. "What? You just invited her yesterday." She started wanting to invite her mother over almost every day. As a result, my stress only increased, leading to more frequent arguments. "Please stop inviting Susan every day." "Why not? You said not to give her a key, so I'm asking for permission." "That's not the point." The day after our argument, I had to leave for an overnight business trip for an article meeting. On the day of the trip, Mary didn't say much as I left. I headed to my destination and busily finished my work. Despite the busy schedule, I managed to complete everything and bought some souvenirs on my way home. I realized something was off the moment I opened the door. There was a vase ornament that wasn't there before, identical to one from my in-laws' entryway. A bad feeling crept over me as I went to the living room, only to find it filled with cardboard boxes. "What's this?" I asked. Smirking, Susan emerged from behind the boxes. "Finally back, huh? You told Mary not to give me a key, didn't you? Well, I won't be locked out that easily." Panicking, I confronted her. "Susan, what's all this stuff?" "What do you mean?" She replied casually, "I'm moving in. It doesn't matter if I have a key if I live here, right?" I questioned her about her previous house, and proudly she said, "I've already canceled that lease." Then I noticed a piece of paper on the table. Ignoring me, Mary appeared in the living room, confused upon seeing me. "Oh, John, you're back," I asked. "Mary, what is this?" Annoyed, she scratched her head and said, "What's the big deal?" "We have extra rooms." I protested. "I can't live with her. I told you I've reached my limit." Despite my impassioned plea, Mary looked at me with cold eyes and said, "If you have a problem, why did you leave?" Saying that, she held out completed divorce papers towards me. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Remember, when you defy me, we're getting a divorce. Now sign it." She forcefully handed me the divorce papers. "That's right. Mary and I will live here, so leave." Mary and Susan said so with a look that said it's obvious. Despite everything I'd endured, this betrayal was unbelievable. In the end, they asked me to leave. I don't need a family like this anymore. Biting back tears in my vexation, I calmly stated, "Fine, I'll leave this room." Susan replied, "Good. Get your stuff and go. I can't wait to see how you manage your life from now on." As I packed, Susan's laughter echoed. Mary avoided looking at me, but I had to say, "Mary, are you sure about this?" She looked at me smirking and said, "You'll probably come back soon. Just cool off." I left the high-rise while Susan was grinning at me, divorce papers in hand. "All right, I'll file this immediately," deciding to part ways with my wife and mother-in-law. I moved on a month later, relaxing in my new condo when the intercom rang incessantly. "Who is it?" I asked, and reluctantly, I let Susan and Mary in to avoid disturbing the neighbors. "What do you want?" I questioned with a troubled look. Susan snapped, "What do you mean by leaving that high-rise? It's obvious, it's already been sold." Her shock was evident when I told her the truth. "Sold? That condo was Mary's property, wasn't it? There's no way you could sell it. What are you talking about? I calmly responded. I bought that high-rise myself. Susan looked at me, then at Mary, who stood there pale-faced and motionless. I sighed deeply, looking straight at Mary. Mary, didn't you tell her? She remained silent, avoiding eye contact. I turned to Susan, still confused, and said, "You called me a freeloader, but I'm actually the founder of a travel blog and occasionally appear in magazines and on TV." Magazines? TV? Susan gaped at me, astonished. I continued calmly, "So, I have some savings. By the way, the gift you rejected because it was cheap cost over $1,000. As I revealed the truth, her face went from shock to anger. Turning quickly to Mary, I added, "And about the food delivery on your birthday. Mary paid for it with my credit card." Mary's face went from shock to anger, and Susan, having a surprised look, said, "Then you can just buy back the high-rise from him. You're a top salesperson with a salary of over $100,000, right? You must have some savings." Mary remained silent, and trying to hold back my laughter, I told Susan, "Mary doesn't have any savings. She's been continuously losing money on stocks. She's almost out of savings. Isn't that right, Mary?" Mary's silence and Susan's surprised look continued, and Mary just stood there. I continued evenly. "She's been losing money on stocks. She's almost out of savings. Isn't that right, Mary?" Mary grabbed her arm, shaking her, and collapsed to the floor as if her legs gave out. I thought moving to the high-rise would motivate me and lead to success at work, but I questioned her while staring at her, and she mumbled evasively, "But what?" Ignoring her, I crossed my arms and said, "I knew it. Mary had no sense in trading stocks. I wanted to support her as her husband. But then, Mary crawled in front of me and suddenly begged, "John, I'm so sorry. Please, let's start over." "Mary, what are you saying to this man?" Susan tried to pull her up, but Mary shouted back, "But, Mom, we can't survive without it." She kept begging me. I spoke softly, "Mary, look at me." Her eyes filled with hope as she raised her head. I continued gently, "You never helped with household chores, saying it was my duty for my work-from-home husband. I'm really sorry about that." Ignoring her apology, I went on, "You belittled me, saying I should leave. And now this. You take too much for granted. We're already divorced. I don't want anything more to do with you. Let's go our separate ways, Mary." As I spoke firmly, she tried to cling to me, but I silently brushed her hand away. Susan, having witnessed everything, cried out in anguish, "Wait a minute. What about the high-rise and our luxurious life? That's obviously impossible now," I said with a tone of disbelief. She shrieked hysterically. "What are we supposed to do now? How about living happily with your beloved daughter?" I suggested. She just gaped speechless. I helped the dejected Mary stand up and ushered them out. The noisy commotion from Susan lingered at the entrance for a while, but it seemed to quiet down when the building manager arrived. Half a year later, I was on a new journey, traveling abroad. The unique freedom of being overseas felt incredibly refreshing. Recently, I received a message from Mary, expressing her gratitude and acknowledging the lessons she learned. Apparently, after being evicted from the high-rise, Mary and her mother had moved into a dilapidated house to pay off her debts from stock trading. Mary worked day and night, and her mother, who had never worked before, took a part-time job in a factory to make ends meet. In her message, Mary thanked me for the lessons learned and the hardship of earning money. I felt a small knot in my heart unraveled. Just a few days ago, after a long time back home, I agreed to go out for a drink with Mary upon her invitation. "I might have taken out my frustrations on you, doing what you love for a living. I'm really sorry," she said, apologizing again. That day, I felt like I truly heard Mary's honest feelings for the first time. "It's okay. Thanks to that, I'm very happy now," she smiled wistfully. "Going abroad again?" I asked. "Yeah, I'm off again next week," she replied. As we parted, she extended her hand, saying, "I'll live as hard as you." Not to be outdone, I shook her hand firmly. Walking home, I thought about cherishing my work and living my life positively from now on.